Can you all hear the music? Can you all hear that okay? I didn't hear that very clearly.
Let's try that again.
Let's try it again, Jimmy.
Sorry.
Play it again, Jimmy.
All right.
Soy un nuevo mexicano y un verdadero chicano. Yo nací en un pueblo pequeño, muy humilde, pobre y sincero. Y ahora les voy a cantar de mi pueblo natural.
And there it came through. How did you guys like that one? That was a nice intro. Thank you very much, Jimmy. Appreciate it. We always love Roberto Grego's music. So welcome to our 27th annual tribute to Hispano legislators. This evening, we honor our Hispano legislators that dedicate their time, their energy during that legislative session in Santa Fe, day and night, to move the business of our state forward, whether it's funding and building our public schools, funding our colleges and universities, building our roads, our bridges, everything that needs to move our state forward to include civil rights and social justice. You know, we always have this event in Santa Fe at the La Fonda every year, but because of the COVID situation, we had to move it. So here we are. We're going to have as much of a good time as we always do, but you're in the comforts of your home and all this other stuff. I saw a few legislators dancing to Roberto's music a while ago earlier. But with that said, let's go ahead and show a video of the legislators we are going to be honoring this evening. And go ahead, Jimmy, with our video.
Soy un nuevo mexicano y un verdadero chicano. Yo nací en un pueblo pequeño, muy humilde, pobre y sincero. Y ahora les voy a cantar de mi pueblo natural. El pueblo en que yo nací lleva por nombre La Joya, donde vivían mis parientes, mis amigos, los griegos, romeros y los mayas. Y ahora les quiero cantar de mi estado popular. Arriba Nuevo México, arriba mi estado querido, arriba mi Albuquerque y arriba con toda su gente. Arriba Nuevo México, arriba nuestra capital, arriba con Santa Fe y arriba mi estado popular. Y arriba Nuevo México, sí señor. Albuquerque están las montañas tibias y más allá hacia el norte encuentran más maravillas. Y en la ciudad de Las Vegas me enamoré de una querida. En el pueblo de España hay tantas mujeres preciosas. En Belén, Socorro y las Cruces también están muy hermosas y por eso les quiero cantar llamado popular. Arriba Nuevo México, arriba Estado querido, arriba mi Albuquerque y arriba con toda su gente. Arriba Nuevo México, arriba nuestra capital, arriba con Santa Fe y arriba mi estado popular. Soy un nuevo mexicano y un verdadero chicano. Yo nací en un pueblo pequeño, muy humilde, pobre y sincero, y ahora les voy a cantar de mi pueblo natural. El pueblo en que yo nací lleva por nombre La Joya, donde vivían mis parientes, mis amigos, los griegos, romeros y los moyas. Y ahora les quiero cantar de mi estado popular. Arriba Nuevo México, arriba mi estado querido, arriba mi Albuquerque y arriba con toda su gente. Arriba Nuevo México, arriba nuestra capital, arriba con Santa Fe y arriba mi estado popular. Y arriba Nuevo México, sí señor.
Okay, thank you, Jimmy. I think we're starting over there. Okay, Jimmy, I think we covered both the House and the Senate, right?
Yes, sir.
Up in a hand for our legislators. And I believe our legislature is still the only all-volunteer legislative body in the country. Is that correct? We're still the only one left. And that may change in the future. And so I hope we'll see some good changes in that area. With that said, thank you for your service to our state and to our community. I also want to shine some light on our sponsors who are sponsoring this virtual event. And not only are they sponsors this evening, they are also partners in advancing the mission of the Hispano Roundtable of New Mexico, which is to seek the advancement of education, employment, economic development, environmental justice, civil rights, and social justice for Hispanic Americans. We are proud to be based here in New Mexico as we serve and fight for New Mexicans first and foremost. That said, Jimmy, go ahead and run the video to thank our sponsors.
Soy un nuevo mexicano y un verdadero chicano. Yo nací en un pueblo pequeño, muy humilde, pobre y sincero. Y ahora les voy a cantar de mi pueblo natural, el pueblo en que yo nací.
Thank you, Jimmy. Thank you very much. And moving on with our agenda, oftentimes people ask me, what does the Hispano Roundtable in Mexico do? What is your mission? And so, as I mentioned earlier, is to seek the advancement of education, employment, civil rights, social justice, environmental justice for Hispanic Americans, and economic justice. And so we've been very, very busy for many, many years. Those of you that know me, I've been active with the Hispano Roundtable in Mexico for many decades. And when I answer the question about what the Hispano Roundtable in Mexico does, I usually show them kind of a list of our accomplishments, and we have hundreds of them, hundreds of accomplishments over the many decades that we've been active. But I want to just shine light on the top 25 of our accomplishments. I'm just going to go through them briefly, and then we're going to get on to our question and answer session with our distinguished panelists, our legislators. So go ahead and bring up our accomplishment slides, Jimmy. Okay, so the 90s were a very, very busy time for us. And we started this Hispanic Stable Cooperation Partnership, which has been a springboard for many of our accomplishments. In 95, 96, we had a great challenge there where we fought to save Curtin Air Force Base from closing down. Curtin Air Force Base was put on the base realignment and closure, the BRAC list, for the first time ever. And this was a threat to our economy. We would have lost $7.8 billion had they closed Curtin Air Force Base down. We saved Curtin Air Force Base from being shut down. We worked closely with General Leo Marquez and, of course, our past Chairman Juan José Peña. And, of course, we have Manuel Garcia, who was very impactful during this time as well. 2005, we worked with Dr. Miguel Encinas to build the World War II monument in Washington, D.C., and it was built in 2005. Very beautiful monument. If you haven't been there, please go see it. Speak of the Hispano Roundtable in Mexico and Dr. Miguel Encinas and our World War II veterans. In the year 95 to 2000, we led a very successful lawsuit against Los Alamos Labs. We managed to get 1,000 who are laid-off employees, and 95% of them were Hispanic, got their jobs back. Next page, Jim. And so we are also the founders of the New Mexico Hispanic Heritage Committee that is now chaired by Mr. Orlando Marquez and Vice Chair Lisa Castillo Perea. Led since the 80s, we led to build the National Hispanic Cultural Center, which was finally built in the year 2000. And of course, our LACE program, Dr. Lawrence Rival has been our executive director since 2007. He's done a fantastic job. And we're very happy that we've only had 2 executive directors of New Mexico LACE, where we've facilitated and advocated the graduation of over 250,000 New Mexico high school graduates. Next slide, Jim. We did establish in the year 2000 with the New Mexico LACE and Hispano Roundtable New Mexico Scholarship Fund. We presented well over $1.1 million in high school scholarships to New Mexico high school students. Of course, the rest of our work down the way. I want to thank Representative Mo Maestas. We started fighting for, in 2007, we led the U.S. Department of Justice reform effort of the Albuquerque Police Department. And I want to thank Representative Mo Maestas, who is representing the community and our amici in this process of reform. Created the fact sheet. White Peak land victory was tremendous for us. We created the Hispanic Education Act. Next slide, Jimmy. White House recognition by President Barack Obama. Very proud of the Rio Grande del Norte National Monument in Taos. And then we also, the Bridge and Lottery Scholarship, that was a huge victory where we fought to keep the bridge and lottery scholarship at a 2.5 as opposed to moving it to a 3.0. We led that effort in 2013. It's still the case today. Very proud of initiating the effort since 1995 to elevate Chicano Studies to a fully funded department, and those there finished the job for us. Passed legislation for Civil War monuments. Then, of course, we led the organizational effort for the Oregon Mountain Desert Peaks that was designated by President Obama in 2014. Next slide, Jimmy. Of course, we started ethnic studies at APS. Fought Land Commissioner Pat Lyons from destroying our legendary Chaco Canyon. We're very proud of that. Our HSOC that I talked about earlier, the agreement was the foundation for the Martinez-Yazzie landmark victory. And of course, we're always fighting for our Hispanic history, heritage, culture, and faith. We're never going to stop that. And we talked a little bit about our forest fires earlier, and we're going to continue being a community advocate for our communities and making this correct, righting this wrong. I get called from the media often about this, and I speak with them often about making people whole. Next slide. And so we're going to continue serving as a voice for our community for many, many years to come, as long as we possibly can, and on forward. Next slide, Jimmy. Okay, if there's no other slides right now, what we're going to do is get into the question and answer portion of our program. And so our legislators are going to serve as our distinguished panelists. And I'm going to ask some questions, and they'll all have a chance to respond. But I want to ask the first question, and we're going to give our Senator Antonia Cedillo Lopez another chance to introduce herself, as we're live streaming now on Facebook. So, Senator, go ahead and introduce yourself, and then I want to, and the district you represent, the committees you serve on, and then I'm going to ask you the first question, and then our other legislators can also respond.
Thank you, Ralph. I'm Antoinette Cedillo Lopez, and I represent District 16. I've been a legislator for 3 years, and one of my big priorities has been the environment, because there aren't, at least when I got there were not that many advocates for the environment. It's growing every day, and I'm really, really proud to see that. I think we've gotten a big wake-up call with the fires, even just the air quality. We've had so many high ozone days in the city of Albuquerque, where our kids are advised if they have any kind of health issue not to play outside. Can you imagine? So that's been very important to me. But my values are stewardship of the resources in our state. Equity is an important value to me for all, and as well as justice. I served, as you know, as a law professor for many years, and justice is just something that I'm very passionate about. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here and looking forward to the panel discussion.
Okay, Senator, so the first question for you is women's health concerns and the U.S. Supreme Court. What does this mean for New Mexico and in this upcoming legislative session?
You know, this was very, very troubling that the Supreme Court destroyed about 50 years of precedent. And what's really frightening about the decision is a lot of this notion of a zone of privacy or a zone of the government not interfering with an individual had been around for 50 years. And a lot of other things were built on that. Contraception, the right to educate your children in a language of your choice, same-sex marriage. There are many other things that come out of the idea of the government not micromanaging the individual, not taking away decisions that should rightly be in, to the individual, including vaccinations. I mean, there are many, many privacy concerns that the courts have been dealing with using the basis, the framework that was really crystallized in Roe v. Wade. But I think for the way the debate has turned out has been unfortunate, because right now we debate abortion as if it's right or wrong. That is a completely different question about whether the government should get involved and take away that decision. My mother is a santera. She's a Catholic daughter. She's very active in her church, and she believes abortion is a sin, but she does not believe it's the government's business. And I think that's how we need to be thinking about this. What it means for the legislature is I think there will be quite a few attempts to try to impose some kind of regulation of reproductive, and it's broader than abortion. It's reproductive health. And there's a lot of misinformation too about the issue. I know I've heard people say, well, Democrats believe that abortion can happen up to the day before birth if a woman changes her mind. And that's absolutely not true. A doctor will never perform an abortion, a late-term abortion, unless it's medically necessary. And if the baby were to be viable and to be able to survive, that baby would be put in a NICU. So that whole issue is just a lie. And so I think it's really important that the Latino community really understand that this is an issue of personal bodily integrity and keeping the government out of our lives in something that is so important and so unique and personal to the individual. So we'll see what happens. Like I said, I do not believe that this is an issue for the government. I'm with my mom. And I believe that it's people should work with, individuals, women and individuals who find themselves in this situation need to have the freedom, the autonomy to make those decisions. And they're not easy decisions. And they should be working with their families, with their church, with anyone else. It should not be the government's business.
Thank you, Senator. And I don't know if everyone feels the same way. Representative Mo Maestas, you want to add to the comments?
Yes, thank you. Just briefly, thank you, Mr. Arenas. Thank you, Professor Cedillo, the Senator. A couple things. First of all, it's just incredibly troubling from a jurisprudence standpoint to usurp, 50 years of jurisprudence, and the ripple effect that may have in subsequent cases. To be a conservative on the bench is to follow stare decisis, to follow past precedent. To be a radical on the bench is to overturn past precedent. So this isn't a conservative position from a political science standpoint. It didn't conserve prior decisions. It flipped it on its head. And to read the opinion and the bizarre arguments that were made from past centuries was just it just was intellectually unsound. It was a sad day for our country. But abortion procedure is no longer a right. What's unfortunate that a lot of legislatures put then unconstitutional statutes on the books, criminalizing abortion procedures, even though it was a constitutional right. And then once it was flipped, boom, the very next day, those crimes are on the books. In New Mexico, we had the presence of mind to find our statute, which was a horrible 1967 fourth degree felony abortion statute, and we took it off the books back in 2020, I believe. And so when Roe v. Wade was decided, Roe v. Wade was decided, abortion was not on the criminal, is not part of the criminal code. We do not need to put an affirmative abortion statute. The way you stop these procedures is to criminalize them, to make it a crime. And so you would have to add to the criminal code. We don't need to put something in the book saying, oh, by the way, this isn't a crime, Right. And I think so now that it's no longer a constitutional right, you get into a policy debate. And that's a policy debate that I've been a part of as a member of CPAC back in the day, the Consumer Public Affairs Committee. I was on that committee for 6 years. It was a 3-2 democratically controlled committee. And we heard dozens of abortion bills that would have ratcheted back what at the time was a constitutional right. So I'm comfortable making those policy arguments, because if you talk to somebody for 20 minutes, at the end of that argument, everyone's pro-choice, because you give them examples of what could happen, and the end result, if your principle is that the government has no business making those personal decisions. So I come at it from two angles. One is it's personal freedom, personal choice, which a lot of folks espouse, as Senator mentioned, when it comes to I don't want a vaccine, don't take my guns, personal freedom. But somehow that stops at the pro-choice debate for a lot of our friends. So we gotta be cognizant. It's a very personal, it's a very hurtful thing. But we got to be principled. And the only principled conclusion is that the government has absolutely zero business regulating it in any way, shape, or form. Because if you make exceptions, that's exceptions to being principled. And so any late-term abortions, which is going to be the battleground, those are just horribly rare and horribly sad situations where the family already has the room decorated and whatnot, but just for health reasons, they have to have a late-term procedure that they, go through that excruciating process. So anyway, it's going to be a hot political issue. Unfortunately, it has nothing to do with government, nothing with due to building our economy, educating our kids, but it's gonna be draining. But hopefully, we can show folks what the vast majority of New Mexicans believe is that the government has no business in that conversation. Lastly, if you recall, in my hometown in Albuquerque, back in 2013, there was actually a vote to outlaw so-called late-term abortions, and the pro-choice voters crushed that initiative, 55 plus. So the voters, have spoken, and the legislature hopefully will follow the voters, and it does not become a political football that it has been in the past. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Senator Jerry Ortiz Pino, do you have comments on this question?
Thank you, Ralph. The debate over abortion that we've had many, many times in the state Senate, on the floor of the Senate, is always very, very painful. And it tears the body apart. The people on both sides get very emotional. It becomes very difficult to make a rational decision when everything is in terms of the most extreme arguments possible. We're accused of being murderers, of coddling murderers, of just doing it for money. It really is a difficult choice. So I would hope that New Mexico would not resurrect that debate again. We settled it 2 or 3 years ago with the eliminating the old laws that were on our books. We're not affected in New Mexico, we're not affected by Roe v. Wade being overturned. There may be a move to try to codify in law the right for women to have all aspects of reproductive health protected. I'll follow the lead of my women colleagues, but it's just something that I hope we don't get into again. Let's move from here. We've got a situation in New Mexico that I think is one that the majority of New Mexicans approve of. We'll find out in this gubernatorial race, as apparently that's going to be one of the key issues in this gubernatorial race. Whenever these elections have focused on this issue, the pro-choice issues have usually won. And certainly in New Mexico, that's the case. So I think at this point, my attitude is I'll follow the lead of the women legislators. If they want to do that codification, I will support them in that. But my hope is that they will not, at least this year. Let's move ahead and not tear the body apart with that debate again.
I agree, and this is also women's civil rights. We can't infringe on that. These are people's rights.
Yeah.
And did I understand correctly that Senator Michael Padilla is in with us at this point? Senator Michael Padilla, would you like to chime in on this question?
Yes, Ralph. Can you hear me, Ralph?
I can hear you. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much. I apologize. I was at a critical San Jose Neighborhood Association community meeting that was a very touchy subject that they wanted me to be a part of. So I apologize for my tardiness. I called Ralph earlier today to let him know. On this issue, what I would have to say is that I supported the measures both times when they were brought forward in the last couple of years, and they succeed. And the second time, obviously, succeeded to codify and protect things in New Mexico. Everything I just heard from Representative Maestas and Senator Ortiz-Pino, and I'm gleaning from Senator Ortiz-Pino's words what our female legislative colleagues stated. I fully support their position, and I intend to argue and help to support those positions. So I don't want to take any more time repeating what's already been said, Ralph, but I'm supportive of the positions that have been taken by our female legislative colleagues.
Got you. Thank you, Senator. Thank you very much. I'm glad you joined us. And I did announce earlier that you would be chiming in a little later on, joining us later on. Question number 2, and this will be directed to Representative Mo Maestas, and then the others will be asked to respond as well. Question number 2 is gun safety and gun control. How do we best protect our children and the public?
You're okay now, Mo.
Oh, great. Thank you. So I'll go ahead and take this one first.
Did you hear the question, Mo?
Yes, no, I can heard it perfectly. So New Mexico loves their guns. I tease that we love our guns more than any other state, more than Texas, Wyoming, Alabama. Everybody seems to have a firearm. And what we have to understand, particularly Albuquerque legislators, is that people live in incredibly remote and beautiful places throughout this state. There's houses like in the middle of nowhere. And so hunting is part of the culture. And of course, you know, a lot of people live in fear. And so public safety is always on people's minds. The New Mexico Constitution actually has stronger firearms protections than the US Constitution. So there is strong constitutional protections for the possession of firearms. But we have to do everything in our power to halt the scourge of gun proliferation and violence. And we got to do that by being honest and being forthright and not politicize this. Some of our friends in the legislature are truly believe that don't have any aspects of policy change. Others use it as a political tool. There was a meeting a couple of weeks ago where one of my colleagues sent out an email like half an hour after the meeting saying, you know, Democrats are gonna take your guns. Oh, by the way, give me $50 to run for office. That's sad when New Mexico politics gets down to that level. But there's numerous things we could do that are constitutional and that are fair. For example, a couple of years ago, we closed the gun show loophole, where if you purchase a firearm, regardless of where it's at Walmart or at a gun show or from a private seller, that there has to be a background check involved to ensure that those that we've determined should not have a gun are prohibited from purchasing that gun. There's going to be a lot of debates. We passed what's normally called the red flag law. If somebody is deeply troubled, potentially suicidal, you can follow a really rigorous protocol to temporarily move the firearms from the home until that situation is remedied. That's very limited in scope. Only 7 people have taken advantage of that in the last 4 years. So when all these gun proposals are introduced, the sky is going to fall. They're going to take your guns. I mean, all this rhetoric is so thick, and half of my colleagues are like bound to that rhetoric that they can't really confront it. But it's up to the rest of us to be honest and frank and do things that we think can curb violence. For example, safe storage. You know, the law, no one's going to get arrested or charged, but we should have a safe storage law on the books so that folks are trained and knowledgeable about how to store guns away from children and teenagers, that like the murder that happened, the killing rather at Washington Middle School. There's also talk about, there's talk on the national level of banning assault weapons. As you recall, in the mid-90s, assault weapons were banned. There was a sunset provision put on, probably to get those last handful of votes. And then when the sunset rolled around, there wasn't the political will to continue it. But it was proven to lower gun violence in this country. So there's good policy things that can be done. And we got to tell our friends just to chill out, that no one's going to take your guns. We just need to have a frank public policy debate so that children don't have to live in fear when they go to school. It's just unacceptable that kids have in the back of their mind, you know, some somebody that shouldn't have a firearm going into the schools, shooting up the school. So those are my initial thoughts, and I'll take any questions. Thanks, Rob.
Thank you very much for that, Representative Maestas. It is a big concern because, we just saw in Uvalde, Texas, and, there's shootings every day in this country. It's a very big concern that we have to, I think, address very rigorously. Senator Cedillo Lopez, did you want to add to that?
Yes, I sponsored a gun safety bill. Well, and I was very happy. One of the first bills that I co-sponsored when I joined the Senate was the domestic violence and gun safety bill. And, there was as Representative Maestas said, there's all this crazy rhetoric. Even the sheriffs came out against it, saying that they didn't want to go into people's homes to take guns away. And I kept telling them, read the statute. It's not going to require you to go into people's homes to take guns away. You always have to have probable cause to enter someone's home. This would only happen if there was a judge's warrant. It was just a real misreading of that statute. It passed and it's working. Every month I get a printout of how many guns have been taken away. Interestingly, Bernalillo County hasn't been as good as some of the other counties. And ironically, some of the counties that were most concerned about it have been really good, because sheriffs are understanding that if there is a gun in a domestic violence home, not only does that increase the possibility of a murder by 6 times, it also makes it unsafe for the officers when they're called out to the home.
Absolutely.
So when people understand that,
Mhm.
they know that this is a good thing. I also, as I mentioned, sponsored the gun safe, the safe storage bill, and it was really rough because I got death threats. I got, it was just ridiculous. Another misreading of the bill. Just people misreading it. I amended it to take care of an ambiguity that wasn't enough. It was just, it's really rough to bring this kind of legislation in this environment. What people don't trust is that these regulations are reasonable for gun safety. Anytime you bring something up involving guns, people feel like it's taking their guns away. And I'm not interested in taking guns away. Of course, I grew up here in New Mexico in a family of hunters, with our guns stored in the house. I understand that. I'm not interested. My father used to say, if you take guns away from regular people, then only criminals and the government will have guns. And he used to say, I don't want to live in a place like that. And I understand that. I totally understand that. But there are ways to reasonably regulate to protect people. And even Justice Scalia, in the leading Supreme Court case, said reasonable regulations are appropriate. There is no absolute right. And we haven't tested in New Mexico yet. We've got some really good, solid legislation, and nobody's tested in the courts. I think if they did, they would find that they're great regulations and they would be upheld as a reasonable balance. So yeah, this is something, when Benny Hargrove was killed at that school, it just killed me, because I felt like, had my legislation passed, would that kid have had access to the gun? It just really hurt. And it happens that Representative Herndon is friends with the family of Benny Hargrove, and she started taking the lead. But we have to just be reasonable about this. We can't just, experience these tragedies over and over again and do nothing. So I feel very strongly about reasonable regulations to protect public health.
Thank you very much. And I think I even read articles that over 70% of even Republicans want some kind of legislation and regulation, reasonable legislation and regulation. I don't think many people are opposed to that. There's a few people that want to just have all kinds of guns for fun or whatever, but I think people by and large want to have some regulation involved. Senator,
the question is what's reasonable.
Right.
What they think is reasonable.
That's true. Senator Jerry Ortiz Pino, did you want to add to that?
Yes, Rob, thank you. It seems to me that there are two things that haven't been mentioned yet that maybe I'll bring up. One is we have a terrible homicide situation in Albuquerque. But if you look at all the, we're over 100 last year, and we're on a pace to overcome that this year. But if you look at them, they generally fall into three categories: domestic violence cases, husband, wife,
right,
grandfather's grandson, some struggle within the family. Then there's a whole bunch of cases involved around drugs. Drug deals gone bad, drug scams gone bad, people trying to steal somebody else's drugs, all sorts of the homicides are around drugs.
Mm-hmm.
And then the third category seemed to be kids with guns. And this could take different forms. A lot of times it's a party, they get thrown out of a party because they're making threatening gestures or they're causing trouble. So they get thrown out, they come back with their friends and they shoot the place up. Those three patterns, I think, account for well over 75% of the homicides in the Albuquerque area.
Mm-hmm.
And what they have in common is that the availability of guns makes domestic situations that ordinarily would not be homicidal volatile, and somebody's life is lost. The teenagers at the party, if they didn't have access to guns, they might have come back and shouted or tried to punch somebody or tried to slash tires on a car outside, but they wouldn't have shot the place up and killed somebody. And then the other one, the drug deal's gone bad. Drugs are the currency of the drug culture. You can't afford to buy drugs, maybe you could trade for gun for them. And so we have this whole intertwining of violence and drugs with guns. And I really think that especially the male mind, until they're at least in their early 20s, is totally unformed, is not fully formed, let's say. Mm-hmm. And it becomes very difficult to control emotions when you're insulted or not respected or you're insulted in some way. And if there's a gun handy, it just makes it too easy to find the great equalizer right at your hand. And so I really think we need to take some steps to limit the availability of guns to teenagers. By the time people are in their 20s, they have a little more self-control, they have a little more vision of the consequences of what they're about to do. So that's a bill that I would support or take a look at. I think it would be difficult because the drug culture is deeply embedded in our society. The other thing I would fully support and I hope somebody introduces and that would be to ban the sale and use of assault weapons. There is absolutely no reason for a homeowner or a hunter or somebody interested in target practice or somebody interested in home defense to have an assault weapon. These are the only purpose behind an assault weapon is warfare. And to try to tortuously extend our right to bear arms to include assault weapons. Next, there'll be grenade launchers, bazookas, tanks. I mean, there has to be a stop somewhere, and it should be, I think, at a firearm that's clearly warfare oriented and has no purpose in ordinary civilian life. Again, it's going to be an incredible battle, but so many of those. I mean, when the fathers, the founding fathers of our country said, you have a right to bear arms in order so we could have a militia that would be able to defend us. That first part of it is totally ignored any longer. And those were the days when a firearm meant a musket. You fired it around, you rammed it, you poured in it'd take you, if you got off 2 rounds in a minute, you would be incredibly skilled. These AR-15s and AK-47s, they can fire 120 rounds in a minute. And it just changes, to me, that simply changes the nature of the instrument. And so I don't think there's any point at all in having assault weapons in our civilian society. Leave it up to the Army to train people in their use and then to put them to use, but not for You're not going to kill a deer with that. You're not going to kill an intruder with that. That goes beyond the use of any rational purpose.
And many of us agree with you. Senator Michael Padilla.
Yeah, so I think going third or fourth here, I think most of what I wanted to cover has been covered. But a lot of times, what I have found now that I've been here in the legislature for 10 years is we focus on various items, various portions of the swim lane, if you will, or swim lanes that we get work done in. This is not necessarily one of the ones that I have been focused on, so I don't pay attention directly outside of the legislative session to the minutia that that others that are experts in this area and understand law, et cetera, in this area. But you don't have to be a lawyer or a scientist or a social worker or whatever to understand that we have a serious problem here. And we are one of the most dangerous countries on the face of the planet. And something has to be done. I call it MBE, which I refer to as management. I'm sorry. Anyway, but by emergency, legislating LB, legislating by emergency. And so I think that, this emergency has been going on since I've been there for 10 years. It's ridiculous. So, the only thing I can add to this is that I did introduce a piece of legislation a while back. I don't know if it was 4 or 5 years ago, that basically held whoever the last known owner of the gun was fully accountable and fully responsible and fully liable for what happens and transpires with that gun. So, I know that doesn't account for all guns that are in society and all guns that are, hidden here or there or stolen or what have you. But you're going to be, if you know that if someone goes and kills somebody with your gun, that you're the one that's going to be held accountable, you're going to be much more likely to keep tabs on that gun and ensure that it's locked up in your safe or wherever it is that you keep safe things and all that. And I'll tell you what, guys, that bill, that committee, that first committee that it was heard in, the bill was run over. They put it in reverse, they backed over it, and then they put it in drive again, and they ran over it again to make sure they got it. And so I hope and pray that these tragedies are going to give us the intestinal fortitude and will to actually get something done, because I think it's going to be a huge embarrassment and a huge problem and a wrong to New Mexicans if we walk out of the next legislative session without some solid gun safety legislation. That's the only thing I've done in this area, Ralph, and others personally, because I don't feel like I'm the best person to carry legislation like that. But everything you heard tonight from my colleagues, I think is fantastic, and I support all of it.
Thank you very much, Senator Michael Padilla. And now you get to go first this time, Senator Michael Padilla. You get to go first. We're going to change this whole thing. So this question is for you, Senator Michael Padilla, and then we go to the other legislators. How can we maintain affordable housing in New Mexico as the price of homes and housing rises sky high? The median price of a home in Santa Fe now is over $800,000. The median price of a home in Albuquerque is now over $400,000. It seems like every year it goes up 50,000 or 100,000 in some of these communities. So what can we do to ensure that we maintain affordable housing in New Mexico?
Well, I think that we have some organizations already in place instead of reinventing the wheel, Ralph. I think we have some organizations that are very successful at already doing this. The Mortgage Finance Authority, Senator Ortiz-Upino, and I and a few others serve on that board. They have been incredibly successful over the years. I think that while we have the dollars available to us, we need to fund organizations like that and the other housing authorities, because they already have studied this issue beyond belief. And they've already put the data and the analytics. We were in a meeting last week on this very topic. And I think they've already put together the game plans. We just need to make sure that we give them the dollars that they need. I'm not a fan of insanity, doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. We don't have to on this particular topic, because we have agencies that are already formed, designed, and have been successful at this. That's the first thing I think we should do. Number two is, this is a larger problem than New Mexico. I think we need to, require of our federal delegation that they work toward inflation curbing methods, at the federal level, because those will have great effects here in New Mexico. So that's the second thing. And then the third thing is, when all else fails, we need to make sure that people have a job. And the way that I personally work on that, I don't know if you've heard, Ralph, about what I do in my district, which is a massive job fair that I hold every year. It was just about a week and a half ago.
I've been there.
You know,
Been to a few of them. They're very well run. I've been to a few of them.
yeah, thank you. And we had over 5,000 people there. We had 60, you might think, oh my God, 5,000 people were there. We had 6,400 jobs available. So we didn't even have one person for every job that was there. Now, I'm not saying that they all got the jobs or whatever, but that's the one little thing that I can do for my area. And I'll tell you what, people show up from all over the state to that thing, because if we can bring the employers to the unemployed and help them find a way to put the dollars in their pockets, there's so many other things that are going to happen for our state. That's why I focused on this job fair for 10 straight years now. And what that does is it makes sure that the families can pay their mortgages or their rent payments or whatever, so the kiddos know where they're going to sleep at night so they can focus on their homework. It's plain and simple. Now, I know there are many more things, and I'm sure you're going to hear some great things from my colleagues on this, but those are the 3 solid things that I think we should do.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Jerry Ortiz-Pino, you want to add to this discussion?
Yes, thank you, Ralph. And this is one of the big burning questions for us. In my district in Albuquerque, downtown Albuquerque, we see the homeless camped along the streets. They were evicted from the park, Coronado Park, but they had to go somewhere. And there simply is not enough housing for all the people who need housing and who can't afford to get into the housing market right now. Not just the price of homes, but the rent that's charged for existing homes or apartments or pup tents in the backyards is enormous. And it really means right now in this state that about 20% of our population is not earning enough money to be able to afford housing, given the rate at which housing costs have gone up. And that's because we have a housing market that's largely governed by the capitalism model. That is, if the demand is great enough and you can build them at a price that people can afford, then you'll build more houses. But it doesn't take into account the fact that a lot of people who need housing can't afford the most basic housing available at the bedrock prices that it can be built for. Senator Nancy Rodriguez, who chairs that Mortgage Finance Authority Oversight Committee that Senator Padilla mentioned, did something this last session that I think is going to have repercussions for the next several years. I think it was really a brilliant piece of work. She got a change made in how our severance tax bond issues are distributed, so that every year 2.5% or 3%, I forget what the number was. It's a small sounding number. 2.5% of all the severance tax bonds have to go for affordable housing. They'll go into what's called the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. That money is leveraged with other funding sources like HUD, like city or county resources, like land that they've put aside for affordable housing, for tax credits from large corporations. They buy those credits so they reduce their tax burden. And it actually leverages, she says, and mortgage finance claims, over 20 to 1. So $1 million of that fund will generate $20 million of affordable housing. We just desperately need more housing out there. And what's happened right now is that a lot of the housing in the stock has been diverted. It's been diverted into B&Bs. It's been diverted into commercial property. It's not available any longer. And some of the landlords won't rent to really low-income people. The only way to deal with that, I think, is to build up the stock so enormously that the rents will be able to come down, that they'll stay in the realm of affordability. Without that, you just have enormous demand and a very small supply.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Sergio Lopez, do you want to add to the discussion?
My colleagues have really covered a lot of the issues, and I was also going to point to Senator Rodriguez. She has really been at the forefront of this issue for decades, and I loved her legislation. And as she explained it, it was an absolute no-brainer. But I also think we might need to start. I've also advocated for a living wage. Raising the minimum age to $15 an hour, because there is no way you can afford anything
Exactly.
at seven at the current minimum wage, or well, and actually now our minimum wage is, what is it, $11.50 right now? But again, it's not enough to afford housing these days in Albuquerque or in Santa Fe. And so I just think that we have to really look at the big picture of housing. Like I said, I think Senator Rodriguez has done wonderful things. It may be time we start looking at the rental market as well and seeing how we can buttress that. Not, because having housing isn't just owning a house, it's also being able to have a safe and affordable rental. So thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Representative Maestas, do you want to add to the discussion?
Thank you. Just briefly, my colleagues covered it. But, good old-fashioned supply and demand. Right now there's a heavy demand for housing. The supply is short, and so the prices are incredibly high. It kind of topped out a couple months ago and is kind of mellowing out. But we have to acknowledge, particularly here in Albuquerque, that our economy has to grow. And that's tough for a lot of us because we love it so much and we want it to stay the same, but it has to grow. And so, for example, there's a proposed apartment complex in my neck of the woods, and all my neighbors are against it because they'd rather have something else. And so, each of these projects, each of these proposed housing projects, each of these proposed apartment complex projects are opposed by folks who live in the neighborhood and folks who generally, hate developers or don't want it to grow. So it's a tough combination. It's a double body blow. The incentives for building, if I'm a developer, I'm not going to build $150,000 homes. There's no incentive for it. I'm going to build $350,000, $400,000 homes. So we have to figure out, is there a policy way that we can work with home builders to build smaller, affordable housing for starter couples or young workers or millennials who just need like a place to crash, stuff like that. Lastly, there's going to be a sea change in New Mexico, I hope, Ralph, because if the constitutional amendment for early childhood passes, then we will utilize the permanent school fund for the first time in our nation, in our state's history, the way we want it, not the way the federal government made us use it back in the day. So there's a sea change. We have tons of government money that we've never had before. The way we help New Mexicans is by giving them a tax break. But we don't want the viejita to get taxed out of her home. Let's stop taxes on property homes. All this stuff. We give people tax breaks. So it does two things. One, it doesn't help them as much as we want, and also helps people that aren't targeted for the help, because Airbnbs and folks who rent to the movie guys get that same tax break. And then also it depletes our government coffers and it shrinks government and makes government inefficient. We can build a robust, forward-thinking government with education from early childhood, K through 12, higher ed. We can have a robust tax base. We can then lower taxes on everybody, and then do targeted spending to offset the cost for viejitos, for single parents buying food, for whatever. In other words, we got to flick the switch. Okay. And instead of giving folks tax breaks to help them, let's just give them a check to help them, and it'd be more targeted spending and incentivize. Just get the incentives right to deal with homeless and get young people to stay.
Exactly. I agree with you 100%. We had a great question from Christina Montoya. Are you still with us, Christina? At the beginning of our networking session. And I was wondering if you can ask that question to Senator Jerry Ortiz-Pino. And we only have about 2 minutes left. So ask your question, Christina, and then we'll give our panelists a short period to respond.
Sure. You want me to do that in a complete, concise, correct way again? I was just asking about, so as a certified special education teacher and school social worker, I was asking about behavioral health and mental health and therapists in general, equity in the pay scales, and especially with the public schools, right? Our providers, we were not equitably represented in the pay raises that went to teachers and specifically counselors, and the fact that verbiage was so specific to those tier level professionals, when there are others of us, and actually the therapists that work in special ed, we bill Medicaid, we bring revenue into our schools, and we were left out of the pay raises. And that was where my question was leading. Thanks. And what we can do.
Thank you. It's a great question. Senator Jerry Ortiz Pino.
Well, very quickly, basically we screwed up. I think we did not specify that the ancillary behavioral health professionals, the nurses, psychologists, and the social workers should have been included in that. We left it up to the individual school districts, and some have done that. Some have gone ahead and raised on the same basis as the teachers, the salaries for those other professionals working there. But we have to rectify that in this upcoming session. I think just making clear that that's what the intent was, that it should have reached anybody working with kids in that school system who is a professional.
Thank you, Senator. Representative Maestas.
Thank you. I'm not sure what the question was, but let me try to take a stab at it. The behavioral health is key to heal, generational curses and build a beloved community here in New Mexico. So we need to do everything we can do to get counselors, social workers, therapists through our educational pipeline as quickly as possible. We also now, with virtual counseling, which didn't exist, for the most part, a couple of years back, we can now do reciprocity with other states. And I know that's hard for folks, but we can hopefully have like a plethora of counselors and therapists want to go on the internet, and you could get a therapist from out of state and do virtual therapy that way. But we definitely need to build our inpatient and outpatient substance abuse infrastructure. The money is there. And I used to think, well, if the money's there, they will build it, but it's not that easy, man. It's not that easy to just build a nonprofit organization and then get the money to do the work. It doesn't just magically happen. So it just takes leadership, a little bit of time. With regards to the pay raises, public sector unions are very, very, very strong, very, very strong at the governor's office, very, very strong in the respective chambers, and they fight for their members, and they fought successfully, and good for them. But we got to make sure that we look at everybody within state government, whether they have strong representation or not, to get the quality salaries and benefits that everyone deserves, to get the best and brightest to work with our youngest children. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Maestas. Senator Silvia Lopez, you got 1 minute.
Thank you. Christina, I think that we really just need to continue the advocacy for this next session, particularly in the Education Committee as well as the Legislative Finance. And let's just keep the pressure up to fix that.
Thank you. Senator Michael Padilla, do you want to add to that discussion? You got 1 minute. See his hand raised, but I don't hear Senator Padilla.
You're on mute, Senator.
Thank you. I was not allowed to go to unmute myself a few moments ago. I think someone just changed that. I promise I won't say so much, Ralph. My goodness.
No, I got 30 seconds. No, just kidding.
No, I wanted to agree with everything you just heard, especially I want to underscore the comments of Representative Maestas. Yeah, I think it's ultra critical that you get together with your union representatives and folks that represent you from all over the state, because I think that's where a lot of things that transpired from a funding standpoint occurred in public education over the past couple of years. So if you don't know who they are, I'm sure you probably do, but if you don't, I would find out exactly who those folk are, and I think you have everybody here's support. I was shocked to find out that we did this great, wonderful, beautiful thing, and the other folk that do the really, really hard lifting as well. I mean, you were depending on school boards to make these decisions out there, and some did and some didn't, as you heard. So please engage your union, and I can almost guarantee you're going to see some very different results.
Excellent. Okay, that was an excellent question, Christina Montura. Thank you very much. Legislators, thank you very much for participating. Our distinguished panelists, this was our 27th annual tribute to Hispano legislators. We will continue in February of 2023, February the 9th, with our 28th annual tribute to Hispano legislators. And with that, thank you all for your participation. Thank you, legislators. Thank you, sponsors. Thank you for everyone who listened in. And let's have a great rest of the year. Thank you all so much.
Great. Thank you, Ralph.
Thank you all very much.
mi estado querido, arriba mi Albuquerque, y arriba con toda su gente, arriba Nuevo México, arriba nuestra capital, arriba con Santa Fe, y arriba mi estado popular.
Nice. Thank you very much, Jimmy Tran. And lovely wife, Marcela Arianes. And thank you all, everybody.